many parents do you think go, hey kids, get in the car, we're driving to Georgia, we're gonna see the Granite Museum. Elberton, the granite capital of the world. Established in 1981.
A few months ago, we finally got the chance to stop by the Georgia Guidestones in Elbert County, Georgia, not very far outside of Atlanta. It's really not as big as I thought it would be. And even though it wasn't as big as I had imagined it, it was still pretty overwhelming to see in person. After all the new 10 commandments and the overall message towards population reduction and a new age of reason where humanity is in balance with nature is pretty overwhelming. The first of these so-called commandments is enough to give you chills. It reads, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. And then it talks about guiding reproduction, uniting humanity with a new living language.
Some of these things on this list have already happened if you really think about it, because uniting humanity with a living new language, that's the internet.
And even though several of the messages in the middle really aren't as controversial, they're just kind of general and nice sounding. It also has a solid eugenics message talking about guiding reproduction, balancing personal rights with social duties, by which they especially mean that people cannot reproduce as much as they want.
The world population that has risen geometrically to almost 6 billion people and could easily exceed 8 billion.
Searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill.
An alarming and possibly catastrophic disaster.
And it closes out with another chilling line, be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Many people outside the Guidestones monument, but there were a few. One lady said to the other, did you read the inscription over here? It's not necessarily a bad thing. You could agree with a lot of the things written on there. Some of them are very blasé. I myself definitely agree that we don't need petty officials and petty laws, but I don't know who could get behind only 500 million people on the planet. I would hate to have it on my conscience to even suggest, much less decide, who lives or dies. To wish death upon 9/10 of the planet is incredibly bad karma, and I don't see how you can say that's anything but evil. Now all that's enough to take in, especially if it's the first time you've come across it, and Melissa and I saw it and we looked all around it. But after seeing a video in 2014 about the new cube that had been put into the little bitty slot above the English tablet, it became pretty clear that there's some kind of code, a coded message, and a puzzle solution to this bizarre esoteric monument that has not really been fully appreciated.
Somebody went to the Guidestones and there's been a change. A new block has been inserted in the corner. This was a picture that was taken before, and you can even see where the little niche mark was for that square to be cut out.
Watch out. Got something on every side.
It's crazy how it fit perfect in there.
Who wants a chip?
The original piece.
Oh, okay.
Oh, can I have that piece?
And a lot of people who did see this cube tried to decipher the numbers and came up with dates and stuff. And it's good that they tried to decode it, but none of those dates ended up being of any particular significance. But if you look around at the monument and all the things that are written and the tablet that is next to the stones that supposedly covers up the time capsule, well, you notice that they specifically don't say when the time capsule was buried or when it is to be resurrected and opened. Well, right there could be the question and answer of this unannounced puzzle.
One of the conspiracies around this monument is that once the date is filled in, it's going to release a bioweapon. That comes from the fact that it's very obviously a monument complaining about overpopulation.
Has anybody seen Contagion? Yeah, that's the answer. Go out and use genetic engineering to create a better virus.
Contagious and highly deadly, a respiratory spread pathogen would kill more than 30 million people in less than a year.
We've got to stabilize population. On a voluntary basis, everybody in the world's got to pledge to themselves that 1 or 2 children is it.
Perhaps, just perhaps, all the numbers and all the data needed to solve the puzzle are in place at this location. After all, there's charts and diagrams explaining the exact overall height, 19 feet 3 inches, the height of the upright stones, 16 foot 4 inches, the width of the stones, 6 foot 6 inches, the dimensions of the capstone, which is 1 foot 7 inches tall, with a width of 9 foot 8 inches, with a width of 6 foot 6 inches, and a length of 9 foot 8 inches, as well as the width of the main upright stones, which is also 6 foot 6 inches, and so forth. On top of that, you have the admitted fact that's pointed out in the tablet that the Georgia Guidestones are in alignment with several celestial features.
It has the astronomical features. So the channel through the stone indicates a celestial pole, the horizontal slot indicates the annual travel of the sun, and the sunbeam through the capstone marks noontime throughout the year.
It's in alignment with the 18.6-year lunar declination cycle and so forth. And of course, it features 8 languages that have written out the message and 4 ancient languages, which are referred to on the capstone, making for a total of 12 languages.
This is interesting here. The author, R.C. Christian, a lot of people have mentioned, and I believe rightly so, that that's a nod to the Rosicrucians, or the Rosy Cross Christian, the Rosencreutz. But also, they put a pseudonym. They don't pay all this money to erect this thing that's perfectly aligned celestially with all this physical data and spell something wrong. If you take all of these letters, the one thing I did see that I thought was kind of interesting, it's an anagram for untarnished conspiracy. What are the odds of that?
How strange is that?
If this is a puzzle, which it appears to be, by use of the fact that there's a key, then we know that anagrams are part of it, which is a very Masonic thing, because you don't spend all this money and effort to erect this very technically precise and expensive monument just to make an obvious misspelling on it.
And since we already have this clue of R.C. Christian, a pseudonym, spelled wrong with an N instead of an M at the end, that can be arranged to spell untarnished conspiracy, it's a pretty big hint that there may be some other anagrams either in the message itself or in the names of the languages used on the stones, and or having to do with the dates and numbers given for the physical data of the size, weight, dimensions of the Georgia Guidestones itself. Somewhere in here there's a puzzle, people. I don't know if I'm smart enough to figure it out, but maybe someone out there is, or maybe with the use of a computer they could run anagram after anagram and number after number in every conceivable permutation. I don't know, but I'm suspicious that it could be the case.
The point is, we know anagrams are part of what has to be used to solve this very Masonic puzzle.
And some people who only want to see on the surface will say, no, it's not a puzzle, it's not yet another conspiracy buried within a conspiracy. It's simply a mysterious monument with the message it has that has to do with eugenics, world population, and breeding. But I think there's more to it. And interestingly, there have been some vandals and graffiti artists who tried to break open the tablet and reveal the time capsule. They didn't get far enough to find out what, if anything, is there.
I thought it was interesting, too, that somebody has actually drawn all over these monuments, and they've written things like, I am the light, we are all free. People aren't accepting this.
Yeah, somebody tried to dig this up with a tire jack from their car, basically. But there it is. The Georgia Guidestones. Yeah. But if there is a code, maybe it reveals something about whether or not that's the actual correct location, how far you have to dig, what to expect, or what, if anything, are the significance of the missing dates for placing and opening the time capsule. The whole 2014 affair with this mysterious cube is just as interesting. Outwardly, an explanation came forward that it was just a couple being married and they put their initials on it and the date of their marriage, and that's all it was, and they weren't authorized to do so, and they shouldn't have, and then it was removed and destroyed. But at the same time, it's very convenient that in this precisely constructed monument, where there was no room to make mistakes, you keep seeing these conspicuous misspellings of the word pseudonym, a notch in the top of the pillar where there's no notch in the other pillars. What's the purpose of it? Is there meant to be a cube placed in this notch which contains the solution to the puzzle which is inherent in this site, a puzzle which seemingly would have to do with the dates of the time capsule and maybe something about an important date in the future? The only way it really makes sense is as a possible solution to the mystery of these stones. Some kind of puzzle that has both a numeric and an alphabetic solution to it. It brings to mind another interesting mystery which still hasn't been solved, which is openly a cipher. It's a sculpture called Kryptos that was placed at the headquarters of the CIA in Langley, Virginia, and created by the artist Jim Sanborn, unveiled back on November 3rd, 1990. So the Georgia Guidestones is not admittedly a cipher or a puzzle to crack the code on, but this one is. And it's taken cryptoanalysts within the CIA and the NSA, as well as private individuals, decades just to decipher part of it. And even though it's supposedly just placed there as a work of art and just for fun and not any matter of great national importance, when the NSA first cracked 3 out of 4 of the messages on this work of art, they classified it and put it in a memo, which has now been declassified. When a guy from the CIA spent 400 hours from his lunch hour every day working on it with pen and paper, and then he broke 3 of the 4, it was only published in a classified internal CIA memo and not made public. Enough so that when a private individual using a Pentium computer was able to crack part of the code, he didn't know that anyone else had actually succeeded in breaking that code. And then at that point, people from the CIA and NSA came forward and took credit. And it's interesting because they just declassified a memo on this CIA Kryptos sculpture in 2013. And it reads, Kryptos Sculpture Challenge and Resolution Information Memorandum. The Kryptos sculpture, located at the entrance and in the courtyard of the new CIA headquarters, consists of a series of stone pages containing code which begins as the International Morse and increases in complexity as the stonework extends into the courtyard. Inserted between these stone pages is a flat copper sheet engraved with letters and symbols, the enciphered message that is the focus of the challenge. In November, a cadre of cryptoanalysts assigned to Z Group enthusiastically responded to the challenge. Within 1 month, 3 of the 4 cipher systems used to encrypt the sculpture's plain text has been diagnosed and completely exploited. The cryptographies employed for the encryption of these 3 parts involve 2 periodic polyalphabetic substitution ciphers and a keyed columnar transposition cipher. They say the exploitation of the sculpture's first 3 parts constitutes a readability of 89%, but the final 97 characters continue to elude solution. And that is still true today. This code still has not been broken in late 2017, enough so that the author of the sculpture, Jim Sanborn, has provided solutions to 2 words within those final 97 characters, leaving 86 of the characters still unsolved. And we'll get to that in just a second. Attached for your review is a brief description and the plain text derived from all their work in deciphering it. So it took professional cryptologists some time just to break some of the text, and the rest of it remains so far too hard to crack. What they have admitted it says is, between subtle shading and the absence of light lies the nuance of illusion. It was totally invisible. How's that possible? They used the Earth's magnetic field. The information was gathered and transmitted underground to an unknown location. Does Langley know about this? They should. It's buried out there somewhere. Who knows the exact location? Only WW. This was his last transmission. 38 degrees, 57 minutes, 6.5 seconds north, 77 minutes, 44 seconds west. ID by Rose. Now, they've claimed that WW is William Webster from the CIA, supposedly the only person that Jim Sanborn told the solution to, because supposedly they wanted to make sure that his work of art was not going to be anything embarrassing to the agency. It's not, for instance, a solution to the JFK assassination. And these coordinates go to the CIA headquarters. So supposedly there's something invisible and identified in some way by Earth's magnetic field buried under or near CIA headquarters. Pretty intriguing and not too much different from the time capsule buried at the Georgia Guidestones. The third message of the crypto sculpture reads, slowly, desperately, slowly, the remains of the passage debris that encumbered the lower part of the doorway was removed. With trembling hands, I made a tiny breach in the upper left-hand corner, and then widening the hole a little, I inserted the candle and peered in. The hot air escaping from the chamber caused the flame to flicker, but presently details of the room within emerged from the mist. X, can you see anything? Q. And this was taken from the writings of Howard Carter, who broke into and explored the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt back in the 30s. And so it's worth noting that this Jim Sanborn, who also apparently knows codes and some pretty interesting information, apparently has done a lot of art dealing with magnetism, the Coriolis effect, secret messages, mysteries of atomic reactions, and that his father worked at the Library of Congress. So perhaps he's privy to some actual secret knowledge. Nevertheless, the year after the NSA declassified the document with their partial solution, Jim Sanborn came forward with new clues in the crypto sculpture, and supposedly he's worried that he's going to die before anybody can solve it. And the first word that he revealed from these final 97 characters was the word Berlin. And so for years, people were thinking this was the Berlin Wall, and perhaps it is. But then in 2014, he revealed a second word from these remaining 97 letters, which is the word clock. And he gave an interview with Wired Magazine explaining that he's fascinated with the famous Berlin clock, which is no ordinary clock at all. It's a set theory clock that has special mathematical principles. And it looks like some kind of mutant traffic light, and it features a yellow light, a row of red lights, another row of red lights, a row of smaller yellow lights, and then a row of 4 more yellow lights. And it works like this. A lamp at the top of the clock blinks every 2 seconds, while a row of red lamps beneath it represents 5 hours. Red lights on the second row denote 1 hour each, and the time is calculated based on the number of lights illuminated. So in other words, 2 lamps on the first line equals 10 hours, 5 plus 5, and the second line, if there are say 3 lamps lit, equals 3 hours. So 5 plus 5 plus 3 equals 13 hours, or 1 p.m. on a 24-hour clock. But apparently this code that has so far been too difficult even for the CIA or NSA to crack, at least as far as they've admitted, may have something to do with this set theory clock, which itself is some kind of cipher, or could be compared to or equated with the cipher within the text. So who knows how complicated this is to break. They've already done everything with the substitution alphabets and the other kind of ordinary sophisticated things that have cracked earlier codes, including the Enigma code in World War II. Well, maybe when you apply some kind of secret about this, nobody knows. At any rate, I don't have the solution to the crypto cipher or to the Georgia Guidestones, but they're both very fascinating, and I feel the Georgia Guidestones in particular, with its eerie, anti-human message and its declaration of a sort of new world order, control over reproduction and human civilization and development and use of resources, perhaps has some very important mysteries still to be revealed. This one isn't sponsored by the federal government. No one knows the true purpose or how sinister its unveiling may prove to be at some point in the future. They've portrayed themselves as friendly and wise guardians of humanity, but perhaps they're too twisted to see how dark their own views really are. For ordinary people in humanity, the very idea of reducing the population down to 500 million suggests that more than 90% of the existing people on this planet should die or should die out and not be allowed to reproduce, which is pretty drastic to say the least. We took in the monument and, we had to move on down the road like everyone else, but I'm still contemplating what the real meaning is to this day. And I guess the point of the crypto sculpture is that the final message hasn't been deciphered and seemingly couldn't be deciphered without knowledge of the Berlin clock and perhaps some other clues that are buried within. Likewise, solving the Georgia Guidestones at least requires decoding it enough to understand what the question is that is being posed, for which there's a solution, which could be a date or some kind of code that seems to be related to these very obvious blank spots on the time capsule and the outlying clue of the misspelled word pseudonym. No one would carve something in stone at great expense and have a simple typo, you understand. It's revealed to be an anagram, and perhaps there are other anagrams and coded messages buried within the text of the Guidestones and the dimensions and factoids that seem to be thrown in your face when you visit and read all the inscriptions at this mysterious and dark monument. Anybody got an idea out there?